Hello, everyone. I guess we are live according to YouTube. My name is Sam Lewis. I'm the Director of Communications and Engagement at Ragdale. And the person that is to this way, I got to get my angles right, is Amy Sinclair. Amy, you'd like to
Hi,
introduce yourself?
everyone. You may know me as the manager of the residency program.
But she's actually a superhero in her own life.
Master of the schedule.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Amy, for coming up with this idea and pushing me to put it in motion. And I think it's great. Our first Ragdale virtual open studio.
We're excited to have you here.
Yes. So, did you have something that you wanted to say? And then I can talk about what we're going to be doing with this series going forward.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So tonight, we are pleased to welcome three writers in the order in which they're presenting: Deborah Siegel, Gulu Syed, and Patty McNair. They're really terrific, talented, kind, generous authors, but the list goes on. So I'm happy to have them here today. We're honored that they chose to spend part of their evening here with us, sharing new work that they've created. The reason why they're here is because they were in residence within the last few months when much of the world went dark. So we're really happy to be able to continue the residency program at a limited capacity and share some of what happened in the residence through the Open Studio event. So Sam kindly is operating all the behind the scenes of this. So it's our first, so we're happy to hear your feedback as well. It's really a cool thing, so I hope that it works out really well for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a work in progress. And I know there's a lot of online fatigue out there, but I'm happy that you all are here sharing space with us. And I know it will be worth it because there's a phenomenal lineup of guests. But before I bring them on to say hello, um, hey, Barry, Barry Benson, Barry A. Benson from Ragdale is in attendance. Thank you so much. Um, and so we're going to do this on a quarterly basis. And so with the restrictions that we have, the mitigation that we have in place due to COVID, we're only having 2 residents per session, and the sessions are extremely short. And so we've had about, I think, just 12 artists in residence so far, well, counting January, February, and March in 2021. So we thought, let's just group them all together because that's about the size of just a single session of residents and give them an opportunity to share together, and maybe they will form some bonds that cross sessions, which isn't uncommon, but we just wanted to be more intentional about it. So that's going to be the plan going forward. So after each quarter, that following month, early in the month, we will have another edition. So seasonally, we'll be doing these until further notice. And hopefully, there'll be a time when this is not necessary to do anymore, but maybe there'll be such a demand. We'll still do some version of this. Who knows? We're open to new things and new ideas. So we'll see how that happens. And so stay tuned for that. But one way that you can be alerted to all of that is to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we have lots of other content there that we've been gathering over the past year and beyond, that we think that you would enjoy. So you can maybe find some things that you may have missed, including last year's Ring performances, all of our Ragdale Talks conversation series, other programs that we were doing in the height of the pandemic. And so there were a lot of really interesting, timely conversations happening then. So you can tune into all that stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Deborah and Gulu and Patty on screen.
Hello. Hi.
Hello, hello. So you are our first virtual open studio participants. How does that feel? That's it right there. That's perfect. So we're so happy to have you here and sharing with us, and you know, blazing trails. And there's actually Gulu and Deborah were in a part of the same session. So I know people, you both shared a humongous home, and how did that work out for you?
Yeah, Gulu, you want to go?
We get to actually see each other, but we protected each other from ghosts is essentially how the whole thing went.
Yeah, pretty much. I felt Gulu's presence on the other side of the wall in the mansion so that I didn't feel all alone in this big, glorious house. But the solitude was also really rich,
Mm-hmm.
something we don't have in our daily lives. I know both Gulu and I have children.
And which session was that? When were you in residence?
February. I came on my birthday.
Hey, that's right.
And it was when we had that big snow, so I wasn't even sure if I'd make it. But
Right. Blizzard.
Exactly.
And I was going to mention that because Deborah took a really great photo on the campus, and I reposted it on our IG page to rave likes, and so that was really awesome. What about you, Patty? What session were you part of?
I was the first one back. So it was January 4th when I came, the day after my birthday. So I was there when the insurrection happened, which was very weird. Felt both glad to be there during that time and also sort of a long way away from the real world.
Absolutely. Well, those are all, it seems like there were a lot of people giving themselves birthday presents at residencies as birthday presents, which is always great, treat yourself.
And in pandemic, you got to up the ante of, those birthday gifts. It's like.
Absolutely. So Marita is saying here, and I think I can, Marita is saying, nice to see everyone without their masks on.
Right.
Regin is in attendance. He says, wow, cool. And Marita has the best part of working at Ragdale's the open studio, so she's glad to be here. Yay. And I might be flashing some of these comments. So keep the comments coming, people, so we can have a sense of who's in the room and feel the love, even though we're in our separate little spaces all around possibly the world. So we want to be timely about this. And so I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say, Amy, before we got started, or anyone else.
I'm so excited to hear the new work that you've been working on.
Right on. And in that, we'll get into it. So we had a little jousting battle in the back. No, it was all good. But we decided what order we were going to go in. And Deborah is in the first position. So we're going to take leave of you and leave Deborah on the screen to present her work. And I hope you enjoy it. And thanks for attending again our first Ragdale Virtual Open Studio.
Thank you.
Here we are. So pretend we're in the living room with fire warming our bodies and our hearts. And even though I'm just a little face in a box, maybe the twinkle lights back there can symbolize the spirit of Ragdale, which I was so grateful to be at and felt so lucky to have that space. And while I was there, I wrote a couple of pandemic essays. I had started teaching a course called Voice the Pandemic, flash nonfiction writing workshop to capture our lives in transition, because I really had this need to process some of what we were living through and get it on the page. But I don't feel like reading a pandemic essay tonight because, we're getting tired, right? So I also, while I was there, I was polishing pieces and adding to pieces and creating pieces for part of a larger project, as we say. It's a series of essays about parental discretions and kind of raising our awareness as humans in a complicated age. And in light of it being LGBTQ plus Equity Week next week, I thought I would read from one of those essays. The title is Meet Twinkle Fido, the Gender Fluid Fish. It's early spring and the kids are digging up earthworms, inadvertently cutting them in half. Marco and I are rooting around in our small yard. We've been talking about the concept of stewardship for the earth, for nature, for living things, when our girl asks, no surprise, for a pet. Let's start with a plot in the garden, I say. The girl throws down her shovel, hands caked with soil. Okay, she says, kicking a clump of dirt. She tends a patch of flowering plants diligently for a few weeks, then asks again for a pet. I'd really like a cat, she says. Cat is advanced, Marco and I agree. We decide we'll work our way up and start with a fish. I take both kids to the local pet store, a mom and pop operation composed of 2 meandering rooms housing fish, birds, reptiles, and small mammals in rectangular glass cages. Free of any boxes, a resident 19-year-old tortoise named Betty strolls around the store, trashy hot pink polish on her Jurassic nails. Also roaming alongside this beast is an oversized hare. Someone has a sense of humor here. Our girl lingers by the ferrets, then springs over to the fish tanks, eyeing the possibilities. She observes everything carefully. The tortoise and hare move steadily along, and a non-binary store employee with piercings and tattoos comes over and asks if we need help. Fish, I say. We're here for fish. You'll want to get a beta, they say. They live some years. Goldfish will die in 2 weeks. Goldfish sounds like a bad idea, I say. The clerk steers us to the beta section where each bowl houses its own multicolored iridescent fish. The hues are magnificent. Red, orange, yellow, blue, turquoise, purple. They have long flowing fins, and each one seems to have a different kind of tail. Why are they each in a bowl by themselves, I ask. Highly territorial, the clerk explains. Males are aggressive. They attack each other. Females get territorial too, if they're in a space that's too small. Beta's other name is Siamese fighting fish. They're vicious, fight to the death. What if we got a male and a female, one of each, I ask. Not recommended. She'll likely wind up floating topside in the bowl. They tell us they'll be back once we've decided on one, then go to check on a customer at the register. So we choose one, a particularly vibrant purple fish with long flowing fins and a complicated tail. We come home with fishbowl castle and set it all up on the dresser in our girl's room. Marco shows her how to feed the beta, just 3 pellets, since this fish's stomach is apparently the size of its eye. The girl watches intently, observing the fish as it swims and glows. Twinkle, she says. She can hardly contain her glee. Her name is Twinkle. What a sweet name, I think, for such a murderous fish. The girl observes her new pet closely. She reports that Twinkle is making bubbles at the top of her bowl. Marco looks it up. She's making a bubble nest, he says. Also, honey, she's a he. We are learning so much here. Like male seahorses, apparently, the male beta plays a highly nurturing role. Even with no female in sight, the males build bubble nests at the surface of the water. After spawning, the male retrieves sinking eggs in his mouth and deposits them in the bubble nest. Sometimes the female helps in this task, but more often she eats all the eggs that she manages to catch. The surviving eggs remain in the male's care. He tends to and repairs the bubble nest as needed, keeping the eggs safe and making sure none fall to the bottom. How strange, I say, as Marco reports these facts. Why go through the hassle of bearing eggs and having children if you're just going to eat them? Regardless, Twinkle is clearly a male. But because we started calling him she, Marco and I stumble over pronouns now. Sometimes we refer to him as he, and sometimes as she, and sometimes we refer to him as Z. Twinkle goes with the flow. So too the kids. Maybe it's because their generation doesn't seem as hung up on pronouns. Maybe their lack of concern with fixed labels has to do with the flexibility of the child mind. Our girl feeds Twinkle diligently for a few months. She's fascinated with him until she isn't. Then our boy wants a turn with Twinkle in his room. So we move Twinkle, bowl, and castle to our boy's room. The gamey scent of fish water is so pungent I can almost taste it, but Marco navigates the maneuver carefully and doesn't spill. carrying the bowl while managing to bypass the Legos scattered across the floor. Our boy watches the operation carefully from his green beanbag chair, round like the earth, then moves toward the bowl to get a closer look. I'm calling him Fido, he says. Marco and I hyphenate the fish by calling them Twinkle Fido. The name sticks. Our boy feeds his pet pellets and gives him love until he tires of the responsibility, and our girl takes the fish back into her room. Around the same time that Twinkle becomes Twinkle Fido, our twins return from a trip to the pancake house with leftover pancakes and a new Beanie Boo bought by Grandma to share. She wants it to be a girl. He wants it to be a boy. They reach a compromise. When it's in your room, it's a boy, she says. And when it's in mine, it's a girl. How's that? Agreed, says he. They shake on it. We have learned now that gender apparently changes depending on the room. I saw Fido jump up in the air, our boy reports. Marco looks it up. Betas have what's called a labyrinth organ, a lung-like organ that allows them to breathe air at the water's surface in addition to taking in air through its gills. This lung-ish feature can be credited to evolution, having been a direct result of living in harsh, shallow water environments, such as rice paddies. Betas can survive for short periods of time out of water because they can inhale the air around them, provided they stay moist. They can also sustain themselves in stagnant, oxygen-deficient water. Interestingly, betas are not born with a functional labyrinth organ. Rather, the organ develops gradually as they grow older. Twinkle is one hardy morphing fish. Also, he starts out blue and purple, but now there's some turquoise mixed in. I think Twinkle Fido changed colors, I report. Marco looks it up. Betas exhibit stronger colors when they're agitated, but some betas will change colors throughout their lifetime. This is known as marbling. There is some controversy, though, about what marbling means and how to tell whether or not you have a marble. I get curious and go online myself. On the betafish.com chat board, one member from Huntsville, North Carolina, questions the true meaning of marble. She says she notices a lot of people tossing the term around lately, and she's not sure if they're using it correctly or not. Quote, just because your fish changes colors does not mean he is a marble, correct? She asks. She says she's seen fish over 3 months old start changing into their permanent colors, then slow down at the 1 year mark. She concludes there's confusion among beta owners about what is real and what is a phase. Quote, I thought there was more to a marble beta than just changing colors. With this new fad taking hold, I'm afraid that people are being incredibly misinformed, she says. We do not know whether Twinkle Fido is a marble, and we don't care. What matters is that Twinkle Fido is our fish. Early spring, again, a year later. Twinkle Fido is not moving, says the girl. Twinkle Fido's colors, still iridescent, look darker now. The girl runs a finger along the still body. Marco places the fish in a small white cardboard box on a bed of cotton. The contrast, turquoise and purple against white, is striking. We all take one last look, curiosity mixed with grief. Marco places the lid on the box and someone sniffles. Together we dig a small hole in the garden, returning Twinkle Fido to their source. Being a family of mixed races, we pour a libation to the ancestors and recite the Jewish mourner's Kaddish, not sure what else to do. Everyone takes a turn, covering the box with soil. We stand in silence until the neighbor's dog howls. You were our first pet, Twinkle Fido, and we will miss you, I say. Then I add, we learned a lot with you. So long, buddy, says Marco. Then pensively, your glass-walled existence was always a bit of a mystery to us. Thank you for being our fish, someone says, except that Twinkle Fido was never really our fish. Twinkle Fido was their own fish all along. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thanks so much, Deborah. So I put a note in the chat and on YouTube about a link. So did you want to describe what that link was?
Yeah. So I've really been, other than writing this kind of thing, I've been writing pandemic essays and encouraging others to do it as well, because I think we really need to capture experience from this time. The 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, there are hardly any records. And to capture the diversity of experience that we humans have gone through in 2020 and 2021 just seems really important. We're starting to offer this Voice the Pandemic workshop to groups and to companies as a way to help people transition back to whatever we're transitioning into without moving quickly and just forgetting that what was that pandemic thing. So thanks for sharing the link. I hope some folks might want to join us. It's on April 28th. It's a Wednesday night, and hope to see some of you there.
That's great. Thanks so much. That feels very important. We can't just rush into whatever the new normal will be. It's really great that you're offering those workshops
Thanks.
and opportunities. Thanks so much, Deborah. So our next reader tonight is Gulu. So Sam will bring up Gulu. Hi, Gulu.
Hello, Deborah. That was lovely. And I'm actually excited to follow up a little bit more about parenting, because that's what I ended up writing about during my time at Ragdale. I came to finish my young adult novel and it just didn't happen. But I'm really happy with some of the work that I ended up doing. I'm actually working on a collection of essays with my now 13-year-old daughter about her and our experience with us adopting her from foster care. So what I'm going to start with is what probably will be the first two chapters of the first two essays in that collection. And the first one was written by me at Ragdale, and it is about the first moments in which we met and a little bit about like our beginnings together. And the next is actually by her because I think it couples well with the piece. And so, and she wrote it while I was at Ragdale because she said she wanted to have her own little retreat as well. So this is pretty rough from both of us, but I'm really excited to share this for the first time as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Gulu.
Great. So this is called Beginning. I met my babies on my 30th birthday. They were both 8 and 4, beautiful, bright-eyed, terrifying already people. They weren't almost people like most parents get when they meet their little ones via ultrasound. I stupidly realized, well after I'd already decided to love them, that my babies were people, small and old enough to project their dreams on me and to reject my dreams for them. When I met them, of course, it's so easy to remember. September 1st, 2016, my birth month and day, the year of Donald Trump's election. We'd had a call on a Monday. 2 girls who needed a new foster care placement. Were we interested? Of course, I said. Then I checked in with my husband to make sure he actually was. Then on Wednesday, their social worker came. She noticed a large print of George Washington Carver's portrait on the mantle. I spent months searching for a print of it after seeing it at the National Portrait Gallery, a man so brilliant, holding a flower with more tenderness than seemed possible. Oh, she said, it's Mr. Carver. No one had ever recognized him before. This home will be so good for them. I'm not sure how the portrait told her that, but I took it as serendipitous. We saw their school pictures in fluffy dresses I'd never have picked out, with smiles I was ready to love. The girls came for dinner that Thursday. Entering my 3rd decade didn't seem momentous, but this did. A buzz at the entrance, a buzz to let them in, knocking at our 2nd floor door before we even get to open it. Little Em looks up at us and runs back down the stairs. She passes her sister on her way back to Miss Bobby. Monica, or Big M, could run up and down just as quickly as Little Em. But instead, she's walking deliberately, almost resignedly up the stairs, chewing on the tie on her hoodie. She doesn't react when she sees us, just walks right in. Then Little Em, seeing her sister, leaves her caseworker behind and races through the threshold. Don't kids usually hide behind their adults? Weren't they shy in new places, around new people? Don't they wait for guidance before entering new doors? These little people I saw then didn't wait for, or maybe they couldn't depend on, a grown-up's push toward the next thing. They weren't inside, and then, unceremoniously, they were. Other parents say everything changes the first time you hold your baby after it's born. Your world abruptly finds itself into orbit around a new human when you are tasked, honored, and afraid to guide into personhood. My center of gravity shifted so slowly I didn't notice it. I didn't notice it had happened until it had. I must not have felt the little tugs that pulled me away. Maybe it moved some when I cooked what the girls requested, even when I was craving something else. Maybe again, instead of introducing them to Space Jam as I dreamed of, we watched Frozen for the 500th time. When, instead of spending an evening relaxing with a face mask and a novel, I watched YouTube videos on the basics of black hair care. I didn't recognize that my entire world had slowly recentered itself around the girls until the night of the election. When it was called that Trump had won, I woke them up to share the news. Little Em on the bottom bunk didn't even fully wake up. She smiled with her eyes closed, asked, "He did?" and rolled over, re-nuzzling into her pillow. I stepped onto her lower bed rail to see Big Em. Her eyes were open, her expression puzzled. Was she terrified, angry, hurt? Should I have protected her from this news and never mentioned it again? I was relieved when she asked, "Is that all you woke us up for, Mommy?" The girls, like many 8 and 4-year-olds, couldn't deeply care about who was president. My first reaction, though, was to run with them to the news. They knew vaguely that Trump was a man who made bad and selfish choices, that he could make laws that hurt people like us, and that I had supported the other side. They didn't want bad things to happen to immigrants like my parents or Black people like them or the environment that we all shared. They cared about the election at the level they could get their heads around at that age. But I hadn't processed it. I hadn't discussed it with my husband. I hadn't called my dad for his take like I had 4 years ago. I hadn't given myself a moment to reflect on what this meant for me or the world. Because my world had a new orbit around 2 already people who I'd known for just over 60 days and who I didn't know at all. And next, this is Big M section. I met my mom on her 30th birthday. Walking up the stairs to her and my future dad's apartment, my future apartment, I was ready. I knew vaguely that my sister and I were there to meet the people who were going to take care of us next, our new foster parents, 4 in a long line, and we had to move again, and this place was it. My caseworker, Miss Bobby, knocked on the door of the apartment. 3 people stood there when it opened, 2 women and 1 man. We walked in, said hello, and looked around. It was nice and clean, and there was 1 room full of plants. There was also a hall that they led us down, and at the end of the hallway, there was another open room with a big table and a kitchen. They told us to sit down, and they told us our names. The man, Nima, the woman with wavy hair, Gulu, and the one with straight hair, Sana. Nima was going to be my father, and Gulu was going to be my mom. Sana was Gulu's sister. I didn't know then that she'd become my favorite auntie. I did know what a mom and dad were, even though I'd never had someone to call dad. I still had to learn what it was like to have these people as parents, or what it meant to make a family with strangers. I didn't know if we'd be together for a few weeks or months, or even years. We sat at the dining table as Miss Bobby started talking about us. Nima went into the kitchen to grab a bowl of something. I saw pasta. It was called spaghetti and meatballs, and when I tasted it, I didn't like it. I ate a few bites, though. After, the mom told us that it was her birthday. She is the one who had chose the pasta for her special dinner. When she was done, she went into the kitchen and brought back cake. It was small and tasted like lemon. It was good. They showed us around their house and what our room would be and what was theirs and which was Sana's. They told us the space with all the plants was called a sunroom. It's a good place for plants, I saw, to get sunlight because it had a lot of windows. From there, we had to leave. My sister did not want to put on her shoes and she didn't want to go. Miss Bobby carried her back to the car without them, and I carried the shoes. In the car, Miss Bobby told us it was up to me to decide whether this house was safe for us. It was my choice to decide whether it was okay for my sister. She couldn't make those decisions. She was only 4. I was 8, so I had the responsibility what would be best for both of us. I thought they seemed kind, so I told her what I thought and why we should move there. And that's all I have for that. Thank you so much.
Wow, it's really wonderful to hear the perspective of your child and yourself. So that's really unique.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gulu. So our next reader will be Patty McNair. Hi, Patty.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thanks. So I was really taken with Gulu's, well, with both of the readings actually, and but Gulu, man, your daughter, she is gonna really kick some literary butt. So I hope she keeps writing. I hope that you two continue to write together. It was great to hear. I thought I would read from A Novel in Progress that I wasn't sure if that's what I was going to work on when I was there at Ragdale or not. But, you know, those of you who've been to Ragdale know that you kind of wait for the muse to kind of hit you, or wait for something that takes your attention and see where you want to go. And so the novel in progress was the thing that I was most interested in. It's called The Lasting Season. And I also am a big journal writer while I'm there. Amy, you may have seen me sometimes in the plant room writing, scribbling away on my journal. But I am a big journal writer, and I probably cut through about 4 dozen pages in my journal, 50, 60 pages in my journal. And I actually found a small section of the journal that I wanted to read as well. So I'm going to read a little from the journal, and I'm also going to read a little from the novel in progress. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute.
Great. Looking forward to it, Patty.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. And thanks again to Sam for setting this up. And thanks to Deborah and Gulu for sharing the time with me. This is from my journal. Saturday, January 9th, 2021, 7:45 a.m., Alice's Den, Ragdale, Lake Forest. I walk through this house empty except for me and Lauren Pacheco in her apartment, and I feel so full of love here. So many days and nights in these rooms, reading, writing, discovering, talking, now to myself, but other times with others, sharing their work, their stories. I'm remarkably lucky to be here. The first in the year, the first since they closed down for the pandemic recovery. So that was just a little bit to give you a sense of how I felt being there. And I imagine I wasn't the only one who's had an opportunity to be there so far, who just feel incredibly lucky to be invited to that beautiful space. And now I'm going to read a small section from the novel in progress. It's called The Lasting Season. And this is what I was working on during my January residency, when I wasn't scrolling through my phone trying to find out what happened on January 6th. But I tried to push that away and work on the work that mattered to me. This part is almost 50 pages in, so I have to tell you a little bit about it. It's the 70s. These are 2 white women who have homes in a Summer Lake community, and they've just left the dining hall of an opulent island resort because of the obvious racial inequity of all the Black waiters in white gloves serving a rich all-white crowd. As they wait for a ferry to take them back to the mainland, Abigail tells Barbara, who is the story's narrator, she tells her the story of how her husband, a Black Jamaican, died 20 years before that in the 1950s. And now the book. She sat back again and stared over the water. She glanced at the blue sky over us. She took a hefty swig of her beer and started. It wasn't an accident that killed Winston and Jonathan, or rather, it wasn't wholly accidental. I don't know this for certain. I wasn't there, but I know it here. She patted her breast, left her hand over her heart. I had a feeling that day when they got in the car and headed to the city to see a movie, King Solomon's Mines. Can you believe it? I didn't know the movie, but I kept quiet. Africa, natives, that kind of picture. Jonathan really wanted to see it. All of his friends from school talked about it. Where's the harm, Winston said. I remember that. I remember saying that we would have a lot of explaining to do afterwards. The whole native Bwana plot line, the great white hunter. It's a story, Winston said. That was a point of contention between us always. Story versus fact. I warned him that the stories people told one another, the ones they believed, were powerful and sometimes dangerous. He always laughed at that. Jonathan was light-skinned, and with his hair kept short in Arizona where we'd settled, he might pass for an Indian, maybe a Mexican. He never had any trouble. He was 9. Abigail's nose began to run a bit. She swiped at it with the back of her hand. Winston was very dark. You know that saying now, black is beautiful? Oh, he was. He was. I wish I could tell him that. I wish he knew that people say that now, that a lot of people believe it. But then I was worried that Jonathan was going to see people who looked like his father on a big screen, maybe for the first time. We didn't have a television, and the images would be of primitive savagery. They even used that term, primitive savagery, in the trailer. I saw it after. We sat still and quiet for a while. A family, mother, father, 3 blonde children passed us on the boardwalk. Dad was in front, studying a map of the island as he walked. Mother looked tired, circles under her eyes. The kids, all under 5, it seemed by their size, jabbered away. Abigail turned to me again. Do you know when interracial marriage became legal in Arizona? I shook my head, a small movement. I'd begun to feel queasy, ashamed. Not until a few years ago, 61 or 2, I don't know which. The particulars don't matter. Winston was already dead a decade by then. We were married in Michigan. He bought land out of the back of a magazine. Remember when you could do that? Plots of land in the West, mostly horrible barren places, sand and not much else, but oh, so beautiful. I remember when we pulled the trailer up to the place that was supposed to be ours. I didn't see what wasn't there. Electricity, water, a house. I only saw what was: scrub and desert flowers, mountains, and that sky, that incredible desert sky. Abigail sped up through this next part. I could tell these details weren't important to her now, not while she told me this story. But they helped her make her way to what she did want to say, helped to keep me from asking pesky questions. They'd been married at a justice of the peace in Detroit, a couple of Winston's artist friends in attendance. No family, not Abigail's parents, for obvious reasons, and Winston's parents and brother were in Jamaica. Too far, too expensive a flight. They were together for just a couple of years, little Jonathan a baby, when they bought the land and moved. And not just them, but a small group of their friends, artists, writers. Now you would call it a commune. Then we called it a community, she said. They made a place for themselves. I wondered about the specifics of all of this. It sounded close to perfect to me. I knew I didn't understand how hard it must have been, building things, a home in the heat. I thought about our community, the lake, Wapakoneta, and how what drew all of us, what centered us, was that lake, the massive and wondrous body of water. Without water, what anchored someone? It never occurred to me, Abigail said, that my marriage might not be legal in the desert. I suppose it should have, and Winston confessed to me later that he knew, he'd done the research, but we had a life, we had a union, we had a child. Our friends, our neighbors, they were white, all of them, but artists, thinkers, communists, a couple. I didn't know anything about that then. I only knew that in the community we built together, Winston, Jonathan, and I were welcome. We were a family. We were, despite the state's law, married. The long, low blast of a ferry's horn sounded. Folks on the boardwalk pulled together into a line. We need to get on the ferry, I said. It was a whisper. I didn't want to say it, but if we waited too long, we would have to take the next one. And that meant driving home after dark. We'd already confessed to one another that neither of us liked driving in the dark. We stood among the other tourists, and I was grateful that since the island had only just opened up for the season, there were not the usual pushing, jabbering masses. The few of us who had come over were quiet in line, solemn even, as though leaving Royal Island was something worthy of being sad about. I couldn't wait to get back to the mainland. Abigail and I boarded and stood next to one another at the railing. She kept her eyes on the land across the water as we made our slow way toward it. I thought she might be finished telling me her story, despite not having told me what she started to, but I dared not say anything still. The ferry lurched a bit. That night, Abigail said, I grabbed the railing in front of me. I held on. That night, some of our friends had gone to the movies with them in their own cars, but they were a group. And it took a while, days, weeks maybe, before anyone told me this. There had been some men in the audience, the kind of people who talk all through the movie, who shout at the screen. Someone told me that Winston asked them to be quiet. Jonathan couldn't hear. You know how it went, I'm sure. I don't have to tell you what happened there. I don't know for certain, but like you, I can imagine. Names, slurs, men. white men. Winston decided that they should leave before the movie was over, and Jonathan, who could sometimes be headstrong, stubborn, went along. He knew. He was just a boy, but he knew. They went off the road in the dark. Their friends who had stayed through the movie didn't notice that the yelling men also had left. They told me this, but not for a while, not until later, when I got the letter, when I asked them about it. They, our friends, because they were that, I thought. I might think it still, even though we don't speak anymore. We haven't in years. Came upon the wreck. There were police there by that time, lights and sirens, an ambulance. The car had flipped out in the desert. Bodies, just bodies by that time. There was nothing anyone could do, I was told. Abigail stopped talking again, and I was grateful for it. I could barely breathe. I wasn't sure I could stay standing. She, on the other hand, was a pillar. Shoulders back, chin high, tears and snot drying over her cheeks in the lake breezes. I reached in my purse for tissues. I gave her one, pressed my eyes with another. The letter, I asked, needing to know. Oh yes, the letter. I got an anonymous letter a few weeks later, something about seeing but not knowing, not understanding, a witness to what happened. Winston's car, another car, the accident. She, the letter writer, was who called for help once they got home. They saw what happened, but they kept driving. They didn't understand. That's what she wrote. She. For some reason, I knew it was a she. The letter was written by a woman. Men aren't always capable of admitting to their mistakes. That's what I believe. The ferry was nearing the dock now. I could see my car in the parking lot past the boardwalk and souvenir shop. I could imagine walking with Abigail behind the small crowd over the gangplank and across the sand to where I'd parked, getting into the front seat, both of us exclaiming over the hot interior, even though we'd left the windows open and it was not yet summer. I imagined us laughing as we recalled the gulls swooping and sparring over the hot dog buns on the water, the relief of the cold beer after climbing down the hill from the Royal. I imagined back before that even, the two of us entering the ornate dining hall and being seated not by a bowing black man in white gloves, but by a tan, blonde college boy, and being served by a young woman, my daughter's age maybe, who would mix up our order, tea for me, coffee for Abigail, and blush when we corrected her, eager to please and worried about her tip. I could imagine us splitting the bill and being frugal with the extra we would add, but then each of us, Abigail and I, slipping another $1 under our own plates, remembering how hard it is for young women, how little the reward for their efforts. We stepped onto land, the two of us, and we walked without saying anything, deep in our own thoughts, those thoughts being almost certainly the same. I tried to imagine something different, and how could Abigail not? But it got to be too hard, this imagining. The reality, the brutal, hideous reality, would not let go. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Patty. I feel like I'm probably not alone to say that I could listen to you read your story for a lot longer. That was really amazing to be transported the way that you do with your writing.
Thanks so much.
So I don't know what our next phase is. Are we going to all come back into the room together, Sam? So we can say goodbye? Thanks so much, Sam.